A lot of people think time alone builds wealth, but if time was enough, everyone who invested would be a millionaire, and they're not. Most people get stuck because they make average decisions, saving slowly, investing randomly, and hoping time will somehow fix it. In this video, I want to show you and Josh what happens when you do it in the right way. I'll break down 5 Fidelity index funds that turn investing into real long-term growth using simple rules, wide diversification, and almost no fees. You'll see how each fund works, why their structure matters, and how much return they can generate on a $100,000 investment over the next 10, 20, and 30 years. And at the end, I'll show you and Josh the single fund whose compounding curve can turn a $100,000 investment into something close to a $9 million portfolio. To understand how that's even possible, we need to start with what compounding actually does to your money. Compounding becomes much easier to understand when you see it with real numbers. Suppose putting $100,000 into an index fund that grows at an average of 10% per year. In the first year, that 10% earns you $10,000. If you simply leave that $10,000 invested, the next year you're earning returns not just on your original $100,000, but on the full $110,000. That extra $10,000 now earns $1,000 of its own. It's small at the start, but this returns on top of returns is the engine behind real long-term wealth. Add dividends and the effect becomes even stronger. If the fund pays around 1%, that's another $1,000 in year 1. Reinvest it and it joins the pile that keeps on growing. Early on, these additions feel tiny, but earning 10% on $100,000 is very different from earning 10% on $500,000 or $1 million. That's why compounding looks flat for a while and then suddenly accelerates. Index funds help this process because they rely on rules instead of guesses. Companies that grow become a larger part of the index automatically. Companies that weaken shrink in influence just as easily. You stay aligned with long-term winners without needing to move money around. Low fees push the results even further. If you're earning 10% but paying 1% in fees, you're giving away a tenth of your gains every year. But if the fee is near zero, almost every dollar stays inside your portfolio and compounds for decades. Together, price growth, reinvested dividends, low costs, and simple rules, you get steady compounding that can scale into life-changing numbers. With that foundation in place, let's look at the first fund in this lineup, the Fidelity 500 Index Fund, or FXAIX. This one tracks the S&P 500, one of the most recognized snapshots of the US economy. Even if you don't follow markets closely, you've heard of the S&P 500 because it reflects the strength of America's largest, most established companies. FXAIX gives you instant access to that entire landscape without forcing you to pick stocks or make constant decisions. For many investors, this fund is the simplest, cleanest way to own the market. The S&P 500 isn't an open-door list. To qualify, a company must be profitable, financially stable, and large enough to matter. It needs to meet strict liquidity and governance requirements. This filters out weaker or untested businesses and keeps the index focused on companies with real durability. As industries change, the index adjusts. When a company no longer meets the standards, it's replaced with one that does. FXAIX simply follows those changes automatically, giving you exposure to whatever sectors and leaders are driving the economy at any moment. The way the index is weighted also works in your favor. When a company grows, it automatically becomes a bigger piece of the fund. When it slows down, its weight shrinks. That's a big reason broad index funds tend to beat most stock pickers over time. Costs are another area where XAIX shines. The expense ratio is extremely low, hovering around 0.02%, meaning almost every dollar stays invested and keeps compounding. People also like how FXAIX behaves during rough markets. It holds the largest, most resilient businesses, companies that have survived recessions, crises, and every kind of market cycle. By staying fully invested, the fund captures the big rebound days that many investors miss when they panic and move in and out. You can see all of this in the numbers. FXAIX has a dividend yield of 1.11%. Its dividend payments have grown 3.32% annually over the past decade, and its long-term price appreciation sits at 12.6%. Those three pieces, steady income, consistent growth, and low costs, explain why FXAIX has helped so many investors build wealth without having to make constant decisions. If Josh puts 100 grand into FXAIX and simply leaves it alone for 30 years, the projections show how the balance is expected to grow over time. After year 1, the portfolio is projected to reach $114,000, supported by $1,100 in dividend income. By year 10, the balance is projected to rise to $350,000, with annual dividends increasing to $1,400. By year 20, the projections show the portfolio passing $1.17 million, while dividend income is expected to sit near $1,800. And by year 30, the balance is projected to approach $3,880,000, with annual dividends reaching $2,300. While FXAIX gives you clean exposure to America's biggest companies, the next fund widens the lens and brings the entire US market into the picture. At number 4, I have the Fidelity Zero Total Market Index Fund. This fund gives you exposure to almost the entire US stock market in one step. Instead of focusing only on the biggest companies, it spreads your investment across large cap, mid cap, and small cap businesses. A total market structure like this gives you a mix of consistency and upside. Large cap companies add stability, while mid cap and small cap companies add long-term growth potential. Smaller businesses can be volatile in the short term, but as a group over decades, they often boost overall performance. FZROX doesn't try to guess which ones will stand out. It holds everything the rules allow, so you're automatically invested when new leaders emerge. The low turnover also helps with tax efficiency. Because the index doesn't change often, the fund avoids unnecessary buying and selling, which lowers the odds of taxable events. One thing that immediately stands out with FZROX is its expense ratio, absolutely zero. You pay nothing to own it. The numbers reflect that design. FZROX has a dividend yield of 0.99%, a 10-year dividend growth rate of 7.55%, and long-term price appreciation of 13.42% across the full US market. If Josh invests $100,000 into FZROX for 30 years, the projections show how broad diversification and zero fees shape the curve. After year 1, the portfolio is projected to reach $114,000 with $1,000 in annual dividend income. By year 10, the balance is projected to grow to $377,000, with annual dividends rising to $2,000. By year 20, the projections show the portfolio climbing to $1,377,000, accompanied by $4,000 in annual dividends. And by year 30, the balance is projected to reach $4,950,000, with yearly dividends growing to $7,000. It's a clear picture of how simple rules and zero fees can shape long-term growth. These returns are strong, but the options ahead get even better. And at the end of the video, I'll show you and Josh the one fund whose compounding curve can turn a $100,000 investment into something close to a $9 million portfolio. But first, let's look at the next fund on our list, which is the Fidelity US Sustainability Index Fund, or FITLX. This one gives you broad exposure to the US stock market, but with a filter built around companies that score well on environmental, social, and governance standards. Instead of picking individual ESG stocks and building a portfolio from scratch, FITLX gives you a filtered version of the market in one step. Its rules-based approach removes guesswork and keeps the portfolio focused and intentional without limiting diversification. The fund tracks the MSCI USA ESG Leaders Index. This index uses measurable criteria, things like carbon output, data privacy, labor practices, supply chain risks, board structure, and product safety to decide which companies qualify. Only the stronger performers in each sector make the cut. Companies with weaker risk management are screened out. The end result isn't a narrow niche list. It's still broad, but tilted toward businesses that handle long-term risks more effectively. A major advantage of FITLX is that it preserves diversification. While some sustainable funds concentrate heavily on a few green names, FITLX maintains balanced sector exposure by selecting the strongest ESG performers within each industry. Because ESG scores can change over time, FITLX rebalances more often than a pure market cap index. Even so, it stays passive, and its turnover remains far lower than most actively managed ESG strategies. Lower turnover means fewer taxable events and smoother compounding. Companies with stronger governance and better risk controls also tend to face fewer setbacks over long horizons, which can support competitive long-term performance. Its numbers help tell the story. FITLX currently yields around 1.09%, and its 10-year dividend growth rate sits at an impressive 13.74%, reflecting companies that reinvest and grow consistently. add in a long-term annual price appreciation of about 13.41%, and it becomes clear why this fund stands out within the sustainability category. If Josh invests $100,000 into FITLX, after year 1, his portfolio is projected to reach $114,000 with $1,000 in dividend income. By year 10, the balance is projected to grow to $388,000, and annual dividends are expected to rise to $4,000. By year 20, the projections show the portfolio reaching $1.5 million, with yearly dividends climbing to $15,000. And by year 30, the balance is projected to reach $5.89 million, while annual dividends rise to $62,000, or roughly $5,000 a month. At number 2, I have the Fidelity Zero Large Cap Index Fund, or FNILX for short. This one gives you direct exposure to many of the largest companies in the United States, and it does it with a fee of $0. It tracks Fidelity's US Large Cap Index, which holds hundreds of major businesses across the economy. For long-term investors who want a simple and reliable foundation, FNILX gives you that steady large cap core without any cost. What makes FNILX different from the earlier funds is the type of companies it leans toward. FXAIX sticks strictly to the S&P 500's eligibility rules. FZROX spreads across the entire market, including small and mid-cap stocks, and FITLX filters the market through sustainability scores, which means some strong businesses get left out simply because they don't meet certain ESG rules. FNILX doesn't use that filter. It gives you the same kind of broad market comfort you get from a diversified fund like FITLX, but it also keeps companies that are solid financially, even if they don't score high up on sustainability metrics. You still get the stability and strength of large cap leaders, just without removing companies based on ESG screens. The 0% expense ratio is a long-term advantage. Fees compound against you, just like returns compound for you, so removing them entirely keeps more money working inside your portfolio. FNILX also benefits from low turnover. The fund only adjusts when companies shift meaningfully in size, which means very little buying and selling. Lower turnover usually leads to fewer taxable events and smoother compounding for anyone holding the fund in a taxable account. As for the investing metrics, FNILX yields about 0.92%, with dividend growth averaging 11.72% annually over the past decade. Its long-term price appreciation sits around 14.31%, reflecting the strength of large-cap growth. Here's what happens when Josh invests $100,000 into this fund. After year 1, the balance is projected to reach $115,000, supported by $1,000 in dividend income. By year 10, the portfolio is projected to grow to $409,000, with yearly dividends rising to $3,000. By year 20, the projections show the balance reaching $1,647,000, with annual dividends approaching $8,000. And by year 30, compounding is projected to lift the portfolio to $6,544,000, with yearly dividends around $25,000. FNILX succeeds because it keeps everything simple. Now, let's move to the fund that takes a very different path and takes the top spot. It is the Fidelity NASDAQ Composite Index Fund, or FNCMX. This fund gives you access to one of the most innovative and fast-moving areas of the US market. Instead of investing only in large established companies, FNCMX mirrors the NASDAQ Composite, an index that includes thousands of businesses listed on the NASDAQ exchange. This naturally creates a strong tilt toward technology, software, semiconductors, biotech, and communication services, the sectors that have driven much of the modern economy's growth. These businesses tend to reinvest heavily into research, development, and expansion rather than paying high dividends. That's why the fund has a very low dividend yield and even declining long-term dividend growth. But this isn't a drawback. It simply reflects how these companies fuel their own momentum. They use their cash to build new products, enter new markets, and scale faster. Their primary engine of return is price appreciation. Volatility is part of the experience with this fund. Technology-heavy indexes often move more sharply than the broader market, but historically, some of the highest returning companies have emerged during periods of rapid innovation. FNCMX doesn't attempt to guess which ones will become industry giants. It owns them all, and because it stays fully invested, it automatically captures strong rebounds after tech pullbacks, which tend to be fast and dramatic. You can see that growth profile in the numbers. FNCMX has a dividend yield of 0.5%, a 10-year dividend growth rate of negative 4.88%, highlighting how dividends aren't the story here. Its long-term annual price appreciation of about 16.12% is the real driver of its results and shows how innovation-focused companies can outpace the broader market. If Josh invests $100,000 into FNCMX and lets it grow for 30 years, the projections show what this kind of innovation-focused compounding looks like. After year 1, his balance is projected to reach $117,000, supported by $500 in dividends. By year 10, the portfolio is projected to reach $454,000, with dividends declining to $250. By year 20, the projections show the balance climbing to $2,027,000, with yearly dividends falling to $100. And by year 30, the compounding curve is projected to push the portfolio to $9,390,000, while annual dividends decline to $50. Not everyone can start with 100 grand. If you want to see how $35 a week or even $5 a day can grow into a portfolio that pays over 8 grand a month in dividends, click the video on your screen.